I'm having lots of fun with 101 samples. Things can get pretty interesting. So, yeah, I'm enjoying this. So I kind of sampled the SH-101, and something I used to do on the old MKII samplers, and you probably do this on, I forget what the sampler is in Logic, but any kind of sampler that you can map samples across a keyboard. And the kind of like some of the reasons you want to do that is, you know, the high note of that synth. You know, if you've sampled a low note and then pitch it up, it's going to sound quite different. So just kind of capturing like different sections across the keyboard gives you a more accurate sort of representation of that original sound across, you know, from low to high. So what I thought, I've basically done that. I've captured the lowest C and the highest C of the 101. I didn't actually need all of them. I only needed, I think, 5, because the rhythm doesn't have that sort of full range from low to high that the 101 does by an octave. So it's actually just 5 samples. The first one's 0 because I used to be a developer. But yeah, so I've basically got a pattern, a basic melodic pattern that I've kind of programmed in just randomly. And then using the document in the description, there's Google Sheets in there that basically maps velocity if you set up keyboard tracking with frequency to the LFO. But also the new thing I've put in there is like a rough approximation of what sample you should assign that step as well. So for those of you who haven't really followed the keyboard tracking and stuff, this might not make much sense, but you know, you can kind of work it out. So you know, every single note here has a velocity setting. This is mapped to the frequency, and you know, you can see different pitches are all, you know, added. And so the additional thing is a different sample is added per the step. So if it's a low note, it's a 0, and if it's a high note, it's a 5. Sorry, low note is a 1 in the sample chain, but it's an actual 0 sample. So they're just mapped across all the notes. So you get this real kind of 101 quality that comes out how the 101 behaves over across many octaves. Old synths tend to not keep their tracking pitch-wise across extreme octaves, and also they just have different qualities. It just sounds very familiar to me. For those of you who don't listen to 101s or have owned a 101, you've probably heard them in loads of records, and I'm just a big fan of that sound. So to kind of hear that, even a similar representation they're coming out of the rhythm with the internal effects and stuff, really puts this machine into a different space that otherwise wouldn't be able to find with just the internal sounds. Obviously you can add the additional sounds to it, which we'll maybe get into in a minute, but it just has a really nice kind of you know, that swooping on the filter. Something about the 101 so the sample, I should explain because I haven't done, the sample is just a very small waveform, so you can't even see it, right? If actually I have to hold them down, yeah, so you can see it. It's just a single wave for each one. So some of the higher notes are like higher, and I've kind of sampled these in the rhythm, and just the editing on it, you can get pretty detailed, but it's not crazy detail. If you wanted to get really particular about it, you probably want to sample it in something else and then transform over them. But yeah, each one of these are just the waveform and then just looped independently. So anytime it triggers, it will just be playing where it is. And just the addition of a waveform along with the filter and everything from the rhythm really kind of changes the quality, I feel, versus say the internal oscillators, which to be fair are pretty cool as well. So as I was playing around with this, the stuff you saw me doing at the start of the video was this stuff, right? So this is using the audio output of track 1 going into the control input 1, and then just assigning that to stuff. So something that you have a thing that you have an advantage of with using samples is you've got those, start times, and you can influence that in different ways. You can, and if you're influencing a very small sample that's in a loop, which is a wave in this case, and you're influencing the start time, you're really getting into like pitch territory, because that sort of waveform is getting really, really, really short, and then it's going to go higher in pitch. Because this is set on a volume output of track 1, controlling that start point, this is where you get that scratchiness on the higher notes, or I should say the louder notes. It represents sort of higher notes. As you're reducing the start time, you're making the sample smaller. So let me just show you, because it's probably going to make more sense. So you get this kind of scratchiness because it can't accurately map the volume to a pitch is just kind of, you know, throwing a different start pointer. So you get some real kind of different, almost like wave textures and some foldings, I guess, of the waves are kind of colliding with the delays and effects and things. Sounds pretty cool. The other stuff that's happening here is the LFO wave, which in this case is dictating how the frequencies behave using this keyboard tracking technique. So like this phase is basically scanning across this triangle wave, and that's set to the frequency. So every time it's at the high point, it's, you know, bright or low, and the alternative one is it's low point of the wave. So when you're kind of modulating the waveform, you're kind of changing the behavior of the frequency, which is quite cool. And it almost becomes almost like modular synthesis-esque in that it's independent. So almost like a sample and hold deal. So the other thing I kind of set on here was the LFO fade, which just sort of influences, there's just this thing here, influences how I believe the LFO, if it fades in or fades out per, in this case as it's triggered, at least that's how I understand it. This kind of creates this sort of sweep of, creates a sweep of filters, because that's what it's controlling. There you go. The reason you're hearing that too is because I've got a high resonance and it's effectively sweeping the filter down, and you hear that the resonance being glided as well. So just really quickly, you've got some interesting sort of flexibility textural wise, structural wise as well, pitch wise, just by assigning some of these things off the volume. It's really crunchy at the top, really crunchy at the top. And the last thing I kind of got set up here, and I kind of picked these randomly. I didn't know what they were going to do a lot of the case. Just turning the setting up and scrolling through what to modulate is often the best option. This last one is the sample. So given that we've got like 5 samples and a lot of blank here, you can use that blank, well, you do what you want, but I've used that blank to shape the structure of basically when sounds are playing and when they aren't, because it's a sample. So in the case of here, based on the volume, it might map across the higher register of the sample bank. So like in the high numbers, and there is no samples in there. So on low ones, you're always hitting a note, or always hitting a sample, I should say. And as you go up, you're going to be picking different samples, and each one of those samples are at a different pitch. So you're kind of changing the octaves of the melody that you've programmed, not without having to change the notes you've programmed. So on the fly, which is quite cool. And then beyond that, you're getting into some notes don't play at all because it's not playing. There's gaps, no samples loaded. So you've got this real kind of quick way of sounds spooky. Quick way of just dipping into sounds. And of course this is based on volume, so the filter being there's that high frequency, because I've got high resonance, is also going to influence this. So you can see this isn't moving now. So it's really reactive. I forget again, someone said in the comments, I apologize, I looked up your name and I forgot again, but thanks so much for that term, reactive. I think that's just such a nice way to describe this. And it just makes this machine feel a lot more intuitive than it ever has done for me. I find the rhythm, you've got to program so much, and it's kind of can be quite laborious if you don't get a good result. Just being able to kind of set a few things up and play around with it, and it just kind of present you with interesting sounds is I always really appreciate that approach. It means I don't have to do as much, and I think ultimately that's better. If it sounds good and I just turn some dials, then that's just more enjoyable. So yeah, some interesting stuff there. The other cool thing I thought was quite interesting, which is somewhat based on this sample, so much based on that sample, but as opposed to it being based on volume, you can just do it on a step, obviously. So for example, I've got this step here, which is the really high note. So if we put it up, the filter up a bit, so you can hear that high note, right? At number 5. So you can change that to be a different octave. Which is, it might not seem that exciting, but when you can kind of consider you could do that as a way of programming, finding a different feel of the sequence, that's just sort of blown me away this morning. Just a simple, is it the morning? No, it's not, it's the afternoon. But, it kind of, just being able to quickly change like pitch and not change, change the key, or, you're just moving up and down octaves. I use that a lot, high notes and low notes, just to kind of create basses and punctuations. Really helps move that around structurally. And you're not kind of having to deal with the same fixed nature of a synth. You've kind of got the flexibility, a bit of a hybrid of the sample, but behaving like a synth, which is really, really quite cool. Another cool thing I found out by reading the manual this morning, which I rarely do, is something I always complain about is when you're in mute mode, you can't see what you're muting, or can't see the controls. They've thought of this. So you can just hold down the step you want and just press E and it mutes it. Isn't that cool? So this is really nice because you can, have notes that sound a bit nasty. Yeah, for those of you who know that are probably thinking, did I, but yeah, this is what's so great about making these videos, is just finding this stuff out. And obviously you can still use that page. Yeah, it's quite cool. So the other thing I thought about while I was playing around earlier was like, so how does this compare to the internal oscillators? I've discovered a bug, obviously, as these tend to do. It's always with these turning these on and off tends to behave. So I actually could turn the synth off and then still hear a version of it, which is bizarre. I'd see if I can do it again, just to. So if you have that off, it's probably not going to do it now, is it? No, it's not doing it. Great. Well, beware. Sometimes you can still hear this when it's even turned off. The only way I found to get around that is just to turn it down here, so that's what I'm going to do. So this is the sample, the 101 sample. Let's just listen to this a minute. Yeah, so pretty gnarly. With the internal synth, you can get some really nice additional quality. So I feel this is quite a good. I always kind of struggle with putting samples with synthesis in this. I think probably because I'm always relying on drums, and I'm always I guess I just used to using drum machines a lot. Maybe I need to design drum sounds a bit more, but yeah, with the synth it sounds pretty interesting. So this will be like the waveform from the dual oscillator, or dual VCO I should say, along with the SH-101 sample. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's just a basic sequence with just some balancing, some oscillators, and it seems to come alive. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I've added, so the project will have the 5 SH-101 samples in it. They're really small, so you can just kind of add them and load them pretty quickly. But yeah, I'd say, like, if you've not tried this, just if you've got a synth at home, or there's loads of demos online of people like playing bloody oscillators and comparing and stuff. You can probably get some pretty good pitches across if you look hard enough, if you haven't got a synth, and then just to kind of map it across the rhythm pitches like that, and just to kind of see how different it sounds to you. I mean, this is just the 101 sample. You could sample so much other stuff, and it's going to make a big difference. I mean, we haven't even got into the bit reduction on the samples, changes the texture. So there's loads of stuff that can be done. Yeah, cool. Check out the project in the description. And yeah, thanks for watching.